Continuity. Every franchise has it, and every fandom will have heated arguments about it. It helps build the world of the story for better or worse. To put it in incredibly simple terms, continuity is the current story acknowledging elements of a previous story. It is the writer telling the audience, why yes, these things did happen. For instance, Han Solo has to be rescued from Jabba's palace because he was captured in the previous movie. Data meets with Dr. McCoy, bridging two different Star Trek shows. The Eighth Doctor name drops his audio-only companions on television, and by mentioning one in particular, he brings the entire Big Finish library into continuity with the series. Oh, I could do an entire episode on that alone. Continuity allows writers to build on elements of previous stories to make something new and hopefully interesting. Sometimes it can lead to amazing things, sometimes it can change the dynamic between characters, and not always for the better. Let's talk about a classic tale of a dog and her boy. If you're watching this video, I'm going to assume you have at least some basic knowledge of Lassie. Why else would you click on a video about the show's continuity? The show originally ran from 1954 to 1973, with Lassie changing owners 7 times, moving from a farm, to the forestry service, to traveling on her own, and ending up back on the farm. And trust me, we could do another discussion on how Lassie was well into her mid-20s and still supposedly in prime shape. It was later revived in 1989 under the title The New Lassie, which focused on the McCullough family. Chris, Dee, their children Megan and Will, with John Provost as Uncle Stephen, and of course, Lassie. If you're looking for a proper breakdown and discussion of the original show, go check out Pop Arena's Knickknacks video about it. It's fantastic, and gives a lot of insight behind the scenes of the show and its development. However, my focus here is going to be less on the production side and more on the in-universe timeline of the two shows. So let's dig into some key events. 1954, The Inheritance. When his neighbor, Homer Carey, dies, Jeff Miller inherits the old man's dog, a super smart and resourceful rough collie named Lassie. Jeff and Lassie become the best of friends, having adventures around the farm his mother and grandfather tend to. 1957, The Runaway. Jeff encounters a 7-year-old orphan boy named Timmy. Jeff's mother decides to foster Timmy and raise him. Still 1957, Transition. After his grandfather's death, Jeff finds out his mom is planning for them to move to Capital City, because 1950 sexism says women can't run a farm by themselves. The farm is sold to Paul and Ruth Martin, who also agree to take in Timmy and raise him as their own. Again, because 1950 sexism says a single mother can't legally adopt a child by herself. Knowing Lassie needs freedom to roam and Timmy is going to need help adjusting to the changes, Jeff leaves Lassie behind with him. 1964, The Wayfarer, Part 1. Paul Martin gets an offer to immigrate to Australia, where he will teach farming techniques and procedures to new farmers. There's a big issue though. If Lassie goes with them, she'll have to stay in isolated quarantine for 6 months due to Australia's laws. Not wanting to subject Lassie to this, Timmy says his farewells and leaves her behind at a neighbor's farm, though she'd be taken in by Timmy's forest ranger pal Corey Stewart 2 episodes later. Timmy is last seen running off to rejoin his foster parents and migrate to a foreign land where a new life and new adventures await. For audiences at that time, Timmy's story ended here, but this is where the new Lassie comes in 25 years later. 1989, Roots. The McCullough family gets a legal notice saying a Miss Chadwick is claiming to be the rightful owner of Lassie and demanding her return. Chris and Dee are shocked by this, as they had rescued Lassie from a car wreck as a puppy 3 years prior, and no one ever claimed her. Dee calls the lady a crackpot, but as Chris puts it, she's a crackpot with engraved stationery, a 4-name law firm, and Lassie's pedigree. Chris and Steve agree to meet with Miss Chadwick to figure out just what the heck is going on. And then...
This is my husband Christopher and my brother-in-law Stephen McCulloch.
Mom?
Timmy?
Huzzah! It's a family reunion! Except Ruth's not here for a family reunion. She's here for Lassie. She wants her Lassie back. Timmy or no Timmy. And all of this is a problem, not just in this story, because Ruth is trying to take away Lassie, but for what this means to the story of the Martin family altogether. According to Ruth, the Martins never legally adopted Timmy. They were just his foster family, and the county took him back when they moved to Australia. Subsequently, Timmy would be adopted by the McCullough family and start going by his middle name of Stephen, harboring resentment toward the Martins for abandoning him. Ruth says that she later remarried, though we're never told what happened to Paul Martin.
You walked out on me 25 years ago.
Do you really believe that's what happened?
That is what happened.
Oh, no, we were only your foster parents, but the county took you back. Don't you remember? Why, I sat you down. I explained it all to you very carefully.
Maybe I heard it, but it didn't make any sense to me.
You were so young. Could you have blocked it out?
He was 14. A 14-year-old is more than old enough to understand being given up by parents that had raised him for the last 7 years. Parents who said this.
Ruth is crazy about Timmy, and we're going to try to adopt him right away.
Parents that said he was going with them to Australia. Parents that he gave up his best friend for. Ruth goes on to explain that she was told it was best not to contact him after the separation, like a parent giving a baby up for adoption. We're not told the chain of events that led to the Martins giving up Timmy, or how long before or after their emigration that it happened, so we can really only speculate. But given what we're shown of the Martins in the original series, it seems a bit of a stretch to think that they believed they could just take a kid they didn't adopt overseas without issue. The way Ruth talks indicates that the chain of events were well out of their hands, so maybe this was just one big tragic event for the family. Except there's still the issue of her claiming ownership of Lassie.
We had Lassie before we had Timmy. We've always had a Lassie in my family, ever since I was a little girl. My father had a Lassie. My grandfather had a Lassie. There's always been one. And Dee, this Lassie that you have is the last of the line.
This is an outright lie, and it gets repeated to Will McCullough later in the episode. Ruth didn't have Lassie before Timmy. Ruth and Paul had never even heard of Lassie at the time of their introduction into the original series. Timmy and Lassie became friends while living with Jeff and the Miller family, and Jeff got Lassie from Homer Carey when he died. Her claims that this current Lassie is of the same bloodline also means that when she returned from Australia, she had to have spent some time tracking down one of Lassie's many puppies over the course of the series. This part we can confirm at least, as a copy of the pedigree was given to the McCulloughs at the start of the episode. It also seems a bit far-fetched that she would spend time tracking down owners of rough collies trying to find one named Lassie, just to try and take it for no reason. The story resolves when Ruth meets Will, and they talk about Lassie and some of the tricks she can do. Ruth has a flashback to Timmy and his Lassie, and has a change of heart, relinquishing her claim to Lassie. Steve and Ruth have 2 lines of dialogue making up, because 30-minute episode, and credits roll. A later episode indicates that one of the current Lassie's puppies will be going to Ruth after they're ready as well. While it is always wonderful to reunite cast members later down the line, the way this reunion is presented just creates a whole host of continuity problems. Why did the Martins never legally adopt Timmy? Why does Ruth lie to Dee and later Will about her family owning a Lassie for generations? Now maybe Ruth and Homer Carey were related, and he took in Lassie or a Lassie of the same bloodline. We have no evidence to go either way with that, so it could be a possibility. This still doesn't gel well with the "we had Lassie before Timmy" dialogue though. It can work if New Lassie is meant to be a soft reboot, only acknowledging the Timmy era of the show. When Lassie went to syndication, it was broken up into different packages, Jeff's Collie, and Timmy and Lassie. Kids in the 1980s, thanks to Nickelodeon, would have seen predominantly the Timmy era of the show. If your reboot says that the Timmy era was the only era that happened, then yes, you could easily say that Ruth had a Lassie before Timmy. Except the series finale torpedoes that. Wholesale. 1990, The Computer Study. Lassie tries out for a research study focusing on dogs and their interaction with specifically designed computer hardware. The study is being led by none other than Jeff Miller, who has a much more enjoyable reunion with Steve when they realize who each other are. Jeff is more than eager to let Lassie take a shot at being part of the research group once he finds out that this Lassie is descended from his. The last scene of the series is with all three of the series' boys and Lassie together for one last time, which is a rather sweet way to end it all. Now, with Jeff here, it means continuity ties not only into the Timmy era, but the Jeff era as well. And that means that without an unspoken relation to Homer Carey, Ruth could not have owned Lassie before fostering Timmy. And even then, it doesn't work with her saying she owned Lassie first. Do you see how this starts to make things fall apart? Ruth lied to Dee and Will McCullough about her connection to Lassie outright. As such, depending on your viewpoint, this can also bring the separation from Timmy into question as well. She acted very motherly towards Steve when trying to remind him of how she sat down and explained what was happening, but worried that at age 14, he was too young to understand it. This feels a bit gaslighting, and I should note that the "my family always owned Lassie" is never said to Steve, just Dee and Will. This is how continuity can sometimes work against a writer. I don't think that the writer, Bernard Bud Weiser, yeah, that's his real name, had the intention of Ruth coming across this way when he wrote the script. Ruth was only meant to be the villain of the episode in that she would potentially come between Will and Lassie. There's family drama between her and Steve, yes, but the intent didn't seem to be to make as big of drama as it wound up potentially being. What was probably a lack of research when writing this episode led to accidentally changing an entire family dynamic from 25 years earlier, and possibly changing the view of a character people had grown to love over the course of a prior series. Given that not many people seem to talk about the new Lassie, it's safe to say not many people ever really give this episode much thought. Most probably hadn't even heard of it. It sort of falls into the same category as the Forestry Service to Holden Ranch years, the 1997 reboot, the manga, and the various animated series. Out there to be enjoyed, but not what people consider the quintessential TV Lassie. But now you've heard about it. And if you're ever in a trivia game with a Lassie category that asks whatever happened to Timmy Martin, you'll be ready to drop a knowledge bomb that'll make the other players question your use of free time. Thanks to Doc Isaac for the use of his music in this video. You can find it down in the link below. I hope you all enjoyed the ride, and if so, let me know. Maybe I'll see about doing more of these in the future. Until then, later days.
All I'm gonna do is pet my neighbor's dog. She's a good dog. I'm busy petting this dog. Scratchy beak on ears, pesky little paws. I'm having fun.